Welcome everyone. Hopefully you can all see me on your screens. Welcome to our Birds Meet webinar, which is hosted by the Urban Birds team at BirdLife Australia. Hopefully there's some familiar faces returning, but hopefully we have some new people here too, because it is Albatross Day. So happy Albatross Day, everybody. I'm excited, as you all are, to learn about these amazing birds, and I'm going to admit I don't know a huge amount about them, so I'm looking forward to learning tonight too. My name is Holly Parsons. I'm the Manager of Priority Sites at BirdLife Australia. My background is almost exclusively in urban birds, so it's very far away from the topic of tonight's session. Before I introduce our brilliant speakers tonight, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands everybody's calling in on and joining us today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm based in Wollongong, which is Dharawal country. And before we get started with our speakers, just a couple of housekeeping notes for everybody. Because we are expecting such a wonderful and large group joining, we don't have cameras and mics on for you all, but please feel free to use the functionality that Teams has in the town hall setup. You should see it on your screens. There is a Q&A function that you can use, so pop any questions that you have for Yuna or Tanya in that. We'll be keeping an eye on things, and after both of our speakers have presented, I'll be able to ask them some questions on your behalf. We're also going to share some links via the chat function that you'll see, so keep an eye out for anything that you might want to save for later as well. The session is being recorded, so if you drop out, don't worry. It's all being captured, and we'll be uploading it to our Birds in Backyards or BBTV YouTube channel tomorrow. I'll pop a link to that YouTube channel in the chat for you tonight as well. So we've got two speakers tonight who are some lovely colleagues and friends of mine at BirdLife Australia. We've got Dr Yuna Kim and Tanya Loos. Yuna is a seabird ecologist. She has over 14 years of experience working particularly on Gould's petrel, as well as other threatened seabirds across Australasia and Antarctica as well. Previously, Yuna has worked with BirdLife International in its marine program, so she was tackling seabird bycatch, looking to protect marine habitats. Yuna's in her role at BirdLife Australia leading our national seabird conservation projects, and she also serves as the East Asian Australasian Flyway Liaison Officer for the Australasian Seabird Group, which is a special interest group of BirdLife Australia, and I am sure we have some members of that group on the call tonight, so welcome everyone. Some of you may also have come along to some of our Birds Meet webinars last year, and our last one for last year was presented by Tanya Loos. So Tanya is a science coordinator, communicator. She is an author. She's an all-round bird guru, but she's currently in a role at BirdLife Australia as our Avian Influenza response coordinator. So this is a really interesting role, a very topical role, and one that ties in really nicely with what Yuna is going to be talking about tonight. So welcome, Yuna and Tanya. We're so thrilled to have you along. I'm going to introduce now Yuna to talk to you all about the wonders of Albatross.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to share my screen. Yes. Everybody can see my PowerPoint? Yeah, good. Okay, then I will also start talk. I want to start my talk by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land. I'm speaking to you from Manly in New South Wales on the lands of the Kayamaga people. The custodianship of coastal and marine environment has continued for thousands of years, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. Today, we will explore the emerging issue of disease in albatrosses, how it's affecting these birds, and what we can do to help. Albatrosses are true ocean wanderers. Like their wingspans can reach up to 3.5 meters. That is bigger than the soccer goal post. They are built for gliding effortlessly across the world oceans. You wouldn't really see albatrosses like flapping their wings. They will gloriously glide using their big wing. Some species can circumnavigate the Southern Ocean multiple times a year without even touching land. They use a highly developed sense of smell to locate food over vast distances. This is an incredible adaptation for life at sea. Albatrosses are known for forming long-term monogamous pairs and raising a single chick. Just one chick, not even, every year, sometimes just once in 2 years. They live for decades and return to the same breeding colonies, very royal birds. And they are great dancers. I can watch them actually all day. Their elaborate courtship rituals are just a joy to watch. World Albatross Day was initiated by ACAP, the Agreement on the Conservation of Albatrosses and Petrels. It began in 2020 to raise awareness about these incredible birds and the challenges they face. By looking at each year's theme, you can actually see the kinds of threats albatrosses face, from invasive species, bycatch in fisheries, climate change, plastic pollution, and then now disease. Of the 22 albatross species globally, 15 are listed as threatened species by the IUCN Red List. That's nearly 70%. Globally, albatrosses are one of the most threatened groups of birds. In Australia, we have 15 albatross species. We are very lucky to have many albatross species around us, but 93% of Australian albatross species are listed as endangered or vulnerable under the EPBC Act. For those who are joining us from overseas, the EPBC Act refers to the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. This is Australia's key national environmental legislation that governs how we list and protect threatened species like albatrosses. This level of threat highlights how much conservation effort is still urgently needed in Australia. Fisheries bycatch is historically the biggest threat at sea, killing tens of thousands of birds every year, and still going on. And climate change affects their food availability, while pollution, habitat degradation, and invasive species threaten seabird breeding success. And increasingly, we are seeing disease emerge as a new dangerous factor. So all the amazing, biological and ecological traits of albatrosses I just talked about at the beginning, in fact, make these birds vulnerable to disease. They live long and breed slowly. They nest in dense colony, like you can see in the middle of the picture. All these can actually facilitate transmission, and their global range means they may encounter and spread pathogens across vast areas. All of this makes disease outbreaks potentially devastating. The Australian shy albatross, which breeds on 3 islands of Tasmania, has been heavily affected by disease like avian pox and tick-borne disease. Up to 40% of chicks in some years show signs of avian pox or infection from a tick-borne virus. This leads to lower chick survival and significant impact on the colony's long-term viability. The good news is that we can do something about it. Like spraying insecticides can reduce the tick burden and improve chick survival. But what we don't really know much about is impact of avian influenza, on albatrosses. Tanya will soon talk about this, but before I hand over to Tanya, I'd like to share a few things that you can do to protect albatrosses. So visit our website for updates, resources, and actions you can take to support seabird conservation. And we are also available via social medias like Facebook, Instagram. And you can also join the Australasian Seabird group that Holly just mentioned at the beginning. It's a BirdLife Australia's special interest group dedicated for seabird research and conservation across Australasia and the South Pacific. And this is text repeal is featuring marine birds such as Gould's petrel. They are actually they belongs to the same family with albatrosses, Procellariformes. Your donation before the end of June not only reduces your tax but also helps our marine birds. So you can use a QR code if you want to donate. And I also want to remind you that our effort must be international and collaborative because all our, pelagic seabirds like albatrosses, borders don't really matter to them. So BirdLife Australia is a part of the BirdLife International Partnership, and we try to work closely with them to protect albatrosses and their habitats across the global ocean. And one example of our international advocacy work could be the high sea protection with the High Sea Alliance. We are calling for at least 30% of the global ocean to be protected by 2030, basically protecting albatross habitat. So share what you've learned today, talk to your network, and engage with the policymakers. With enough awareness and public pressure, I believe we can drive better protections in fisheries, climate policy, and biosecurity. Now I will let Tanya to give you a talk on avian influenza.
Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Yuna. I'll just get my screen. I'll just share my screen now and start my presentation. Just give me a moment. Starting the slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Thank you for that wonderful introduction to albatross, and it's just amazing how many species we have here in Australia. It really gives us a sense of responsibility for albatross worldwide. So thanks for the introduction, both to Holly and Yuna. I just wanted to note before we get started that I'm calling from Central Victoria, and I'm calling from the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung. And I pay my respects to the Dja Dja Wurrung elders, past, present, and emerging, and also welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who may be listening today. So for my talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about avian influenza, just a bit of a background on what it is, and then we're going to look a bit more closely at albatross, and then we're going to look at try and end on a positive note about things that we can do. So we've heard a lot about avian influenza to do with poultry. However, it's quite a complex disease. So it's an influenza A virus with a lot of diversity, and there's all these different subtypes. And these subtypes can be classified into low pathogenic avian influenza, or LPAI, or high pathogenic avian influenza, which is HPAI. And so they all have different numbers and letters. And so the low pathogenic versions, they're quite common. in wild birds, they might cause a bit of illness or no effects at all. Like, for example, ducks and waterfowl often have low pathogenic avian influenza viruses and absolutely no symptoms at all. And so they're considered a natural part of wild bird ecology. And if poultry end up getting a low pathogenic avian influenza, there aren't really any ill effects. However, there are strains, and these are H5 and H7. So we've had the H7N3, H7N8, and H7N9 causing those really devastating outbreaks in poultry farms here in Australia. Another high pathogenic avian influenza strain is H5. So H5 is, or H5N1, we know that chickens, the poultry industry necessitates a lot of chickens together in a pretty small space. These are examples of normal chicken husbandry in the poultry industry from a New South Wales government website. And that closeness and sheer numbers of the birds is like, that's an absolute breeding ground for avian influenza viruses. And what happens is it mutates into these problematic clades, and then it circulates back into wild birds, and then goes out and then back in again and keeps going. And then we end up with this thing, which is highly pathogenic avian influenza. Full name is H5N1 clade 2.3.4.4b. So just like COVID with Omicron and all of Delta, there's these specific naming conventions. So what is it? So what happens, and what kind of birds are mostly affected by H5 bird flu? So it's all birds that are associated with water. This includes seabirds such as Albatross, which is our star of tonight's presentation, gulls and terns, petrels, the pelicans we've got here, pictured here, penguins, and then also water birds, so ducks, ibis, and shorebirds or migratory shorebirds or waders, such as, there's many species, but I've got examples there, ruddy turnstones and stints. H5 bird flu is also the raptors, the birds that scavenge on any dying or dead animals that have been, birds that have been affected by H5 bird flu, then they contract it as well. So that association with water is very strong, but it's also really affecting animals, colonial nesting birds, birds that congregate in really big breeding colonies, and birds that feed together in very close mixed species groups, such as shorebirds on the beach, rafts of seabirds, such as albatross or petrels, or birds scavenging around a carcass. So it's this association with water, and then how much the birds are associating with each other. Now, I didn't want to have this presentation with lots and lots of slides of mortality and outbreaks, but I did think perhaps for the purposes of getting to know what to look out for, that we would look at maybe what are the signs of H5 bird flu. And there was a video, but I didn't want to share. It was just too horrible. So they get these neurological signs. This is a sandwich tern, and it's sort of like, it's got its head thrown back and it was flopping around on the ground. And so it affects all their nerves and coordination and trembling. However, as any bird owner knows, I have an aviary of rescue parrots, budgies and cockatiels and other species. And often when birds are really sick, they manage to mask their symptoms, and they basically are just sort of lethargic and not really moving. And other ways that it manifests is a lot of like watery eyes and stuff around their eyes, and also respiratory disease as well. Unfortunately, there's no cure for H5 bird flu, and when birds contract it, they generally die of this really quite severe strain. So I've only been talking about birds, but as you will have seen in the news, there's other animals affected by this latest strain. And this graphic here, we've got here aquatic birds in the middle, which are the natural reservoir hosts for this H5 bird flu. And then they go into seabirds, and then it goes into poultry. But then since 2021, it's just been incredible how strong this virus is and how it's jumped and been able to go into other species. And so this transmission has happened from seabirds to pinnipeds, or like seals and sea lions, and it's also going into the animals pardon me, that scavenge on affected aquatic birds. And then some really strange stuff is happening where we've got all the dairy herds affected, particularly in the United States, and then we're seeing spread of H5 bird flu from cows into like cats and mice and even blackbirds. So it's just at these times, we always hear the word unprecedented in these crazy times, what mainly to do with the weather. But yeah, this virus definitely is, this strain is unprecedented, and the effects worldwide have been, yeah, incredible, basically. So looking at this graphic here, we can see where H5 bird flu has occurred during this last huge outbreak. And you can see the stars are just pointing out some of the more serious outbreaks, and the numbers are pretty incredible. So in Peru, 21,000 pelicans died, and we had 17,000 elephant seals, and when we look at this little graph on that says with B there, so there were just on the right, the blue one, or my right, there's 457 species are affected by H5 bird flu, whereas previously it was just 46. So it's really, it's pretty serious. But there's something about this map that's kind of interesting. And if we have a look at another map, I couldn't help but put a little love heart there, you know. It hasn't arrived here. So Australia and New Zealand, or Oceania, and it's this this graphic here is from AviFlu Map, which is an H5 model tool for Australia's wild birds that BirdLife Australia was very pleased to work on with Wildlife Health Australia and Deakin University. And there's various functions with this tool, but this particular page shows outbreak data from all over the world, and it's actually an animation. I just put it on 2023 to show the sheer number of cases. So the orange is the domestic birds, and the sort of purpley color is wild birds. But yeah, again, pointing out that it hasn't affected our part of the world yet. So let's just have a look. So if we, so Holly mentioned the East Asian Australasian flyway. So this flyway has man, like 6 million waders use this annually. And if we flip back to this page, we can see that there's definitely H5 bird flu up here in the northern parts of the EAAF. So, you know, what's going on? And they think that there's a bit of natural resilience with these birds because they've contracted it in other parts of the world and not actually died of it. And also, if they're very sick, they can't actually bring it. So it hasn't happened yet here, but there's been recent studies where another possible route they've realized is actually, pardon me, through the Southern Ocean flyway. And so we've got these different colors here are actually the flying areas, the migration routes, sorry, of South Polar skua, brown skua, wandering albatross, and the southern giant petrel. And then this is showing their sort of circumnavigating routes around and seeing where transmission could occur. So what this means is that H5 bird flu can really, it's not just the spring wader migratory shorebird migration. It's actually could be at any time of the year. And brown skuas are thought to be particularly likely carrier H5 bird flu. So let's just have a little break from all the maps and outbreak information and just celebrate this amazing bird. This is Wisdom. She's 74 years old at least, and she's still coming back to an island in Hawaii every year. Biologists estimate that she's flown 3 million miles, laid 50 to 60 eggs, and fledged some 30 chicks in her lifetime. She was first banded in 1956 by legendary bird biologist Chan Robbins. She's worn this band numbered Z333. And that band has been replaced 6 times over her lifetime. So she was an adult when she was banded, meaning she was at least 5 years old already in 1956, which is just amazing. And one thing that that Wisdom is so inspiring about Wisdom is she's managed to navigate all the threats that Yuna was talking about before. Longline fishing, other kinds of disease. Yeah, we really hope that, you know, she's not going to contract avian influenza and continue to have such a lovely, successful breeding and life. It's wonderful to see. So how has H5 bird flu affected albatross and other members of the family? So this map that Yuna showed before, this shows the ACAP signatories. ACAP is the Agreement on the Conservation of Albatross and Petrels. And you can see a lot of those countries are in the Southern Hemisphere, which kind of makes sense, seeing as we've got so many species. And you can see there's quite a few species that have actually had some pretty serious outbreaks. I said I wasn't going to show you photos of dead or dying birds, but I will give a few statistics on some of the effects so far. So this is a black-browed albatross colony in happier times. This is 200,000 nests, and this was taken by BirdLife International partner, the Falklands Conservation Group, and they went out to celebrate World Albatross Day in 2020. You can just see there's a person and how big these albatross are. It really, they're just huge. Anyway, in autumn 2023, observers reported a few dozen adults dead, and then by January there was 10,000 dead chicks and several thousand dead adults. So that's really really sad to see. Another area is Bird Island, which is really important island for albatross. You can see here there's 650 nests of the wandering albatross, which is pictured here, and also many, many black-browed and grey-headed albatross nests. And in February 2024, more than 50 adult wandering albatrosses were discovered that had succumbed to H5 bird flu. And seeing as they live for so long and it takes them ages to get to breeding, to get to adulthood, to be able to breed, and they only raise one chick a year, any death of the adults is really quite serious. So H5 bird flu is a devastating disease. So what do we do? So when I started this role in November last year, the word that was used a lot was preparedness. And I was like, is that a real word? And it just didn't make sense to me. It sounded like a made up corporate word. But I thought I'll finally have a look and get a definition. And it's a state of adequate preparation in case of war. And I think it's so adequate because we're preparing for outbreaks, for mass mortality. And so, yeah, the H5 bird flu is classified as an emergency animal disease. And so that means that it's a disease of national significance, and it's coordinated, the response is coordinated by the federal government, and then the jurisdictions, which is the states and territories, under various types of biosecurity legislations and agreements. And it's really, it's quite complex. But yeah, there's a lot of preparedness work going on. So what's happening within our organization? So most of you would be familiar with BirdLife Australia, but some people don't realize how many staff we have these days. So we've got 130 staff, and 85 of these are scientists. And some of these scientists you see pictured there, that was on our recent trip out to the Werribee Sewage plant, and we saw this beautiful endangered young juvenile orange-bellied parrot. So we've got threatened species programs, and we've got a BirdLife network, we've got reserves and observatories and special interest groups, including the Australasian Seabird group that Yuna mentioned before. So with all of this, what are we doing? Well, we've got an HPAI task force, which is like a group of the different parts of BirdLife all meeting together. I coordinate that. And we meet together monthly or more often as needed to discuss what's our preparedness response, and also scenario planning in the event of an outbreak. We've got an updated website page, which includes a fact sheet and an FAQ. And since last year, or even earlier, actually for ages, I think my colleague Chris Purnell has been on the National Avian Influenza Wild Bird Surveillance Program and providing really amazing information and advice on wild bird, particularly water bird ecology as part of that program. We're also working on a few major projects. We're AviFluMap, which I mentioned before, and that data that's in AviFluMap, it actually comes from all of our volunteers and amazing special interest groups. And we really value the contribution that all of the monitoring volunteers make, because without data, we can't actually track what's happening. Another project we're working on is the susceptibility and mitigation assessment with the federal government, DQ. And finally, so that susceptibility and mitigation assessment is trying to work out which Australian species, both bird and mammal, are going to be most affected by H5 bird flu, and what we can do about it. And then finally, there's the National Seabird Colony Register, And Yuna's working on that project as well with the federal government. So that's very exciting. Again, we really need to have good data on where all of these special species are. So what else can we do? So just today, the federal government hosted a big webinar, and they talked about, because we can't actually stop bird flu, H5 bird flu, from arriving in Australia. And once birds are affected, it's very difficult to actually, we can't do much about it. So the thing we have to do is prepare by having strong, healthy wildlife populations and habitats. So that's increasing resilience, mitigating impacts, first of all. And so that would be, in the case of albatrosses, is just really making sure that we're reducing all the threats that face albatross, including plastic pollution and the long line fishing problem that Yuna was talking about before. We've also got to limit the spread, and because albatross are so often on very remote islands, one of the worst things you could imagine is the people who love and care for the albatrosses actually bringing the disease to an island themselves via human transmission. And so there's this fantastic document also by the ACAP group, which is guidelines for working with albatrosses and petrels, that include all of the biosecurity stuff, that protocols that need to be undertaken to ensure that H5 bird flu isn't brought to one of these remote islands. And then what can you do? So avoid, record, and report is the kind of the three things to remember. You want to avoid touching sick or dead birds. But if you see sick or dead wildlife, particularly if it's water birds, like in the species and families that I've been talking about, record what you see, location, the number of birds, and then report it to the Emergency Animal Disease Hotline. And that's a number, 1800 675 888. That's really important. This is surveillance. And so we really want to find out where outbreaks are occurring so a response can be made immediately. If you're a BirdLife group and you're living, let's say, near a large lake, or you're particularly concerned about birds that you're caring for in your local environment, there's also Wildlife Health Australia risk mitigation toolboxes. And there's a link there. And there's also one of the big things that we'll need to do in the event of an outbreak is actually communicate what's happening to the general public and make sure people reduce stresses to the animals if there is an outbreak. So avoiding the sites, definitely controlling pets, especially dogs, off leads. And so there's a series of posters and comms materials at the DAF website, and the link is there as well. So I'll end it there, and then we can have some questions.
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Thanks so much, Tanya. Thanks, Yuna. That was fantastic. I might actually pop Yuna up on the screen too. There we go. There's a couple of questions that have come in, so let's go through them. Going back to, I think a lot of them are going to be bird flu focused. So you said at the start of your session, Tanya, that this has often come from sort of closed conditions in chicken farms. If chickens have the disease, are their eggs still sold to us? Is there a risk of transmission? Do you know?
Okay. All right. So I'm not the best person to answer poultry related questions, I have to say, because I've been spending so much time getting my head around the H5N1 that doesn't really have yeah. So basically, I've been really focused on the wildlife. So the short answer is I don't know. I'm really sorry, but please go to the DAF website. It has all of those questions related to chickens, and that's for people who have backyard flocks, as well as people who are worried about eggs as well.
Great, thank you. So the links are in the Q&A. I've been putting them in, and Yuna's also put them in the chat. So if you can't get into the chat, because I think that might be if you have a Microsoft account, you can access. If you don't, maybe you can't. But they're all in the Q&A as well.
I'll just, sorry, I just saw the question again, and their eggs will not be sold to us. Like the minute there's H5 bird flu, that there's a huge process where that facility is locked down, and then all of the birds are depopulated, it's called. And so they're actually euthanized straight away. So no one will get H5 bird flu affected eggs.
I also wanted to add, like if you properly cook the eggs, the virus will be dead, and a lot of, the transmission between human and birds were people working in the poultry, not because they were consuming any of the product.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, it's transmitted through saliva, feathers, blood, sort of fluids. If you think of how COVID is transmitted, it's a little bit like that.
Well, that actually ties in with the next question that came up, which was how is it actually spread amongst individual birds? And so it's direct sort of contact.
Yeah, and it's like the emissions from their nose, like their nasal fluids, when a raptor, like in America, the bald eagles have been really badly affected because they're actually eating birds that have been affected by H5 bird flu. So that's another way. And the cases of cats, that's because they've been eating birds affected by the bird flu. So it's very much transmitted by the fluids, and also a little bit by the airborne aerosols, I believe.
So I'm going to jump around a little bit. Can you spell out exactly who DAF are? What's the acronym stand for?
I don't know. It says agriculture.com. It's a Department of, hang on. I'll look that up.
I think it's Department of Agriculture, Fishery and Forest.
Forestry,
Forest forestry.
Yes, Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
So let's go to, speaking of the feds, are they likely to continue to fund surveillance programs? I don't know if we can answer that, but I guess, Tanya, you've sort of sat in some of these sort of sessions.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge part of their of what they're doing. Yeah, massive surveillance, they call it, because it's a nationally notifiable disease, and it has such a potential to affect not only the poultry industry, but also the cattle industry and the tourism industry. They are surveilling like very closely.
Great. So we've got an albatross question and a bird flu question. How concerned are we about the breeding colonies of shy albatross in Tasmania in regards to bird flu, and why? And do we know why their populations don't seem to be growing?
So this is actually one of the well-managed colonies, and a good example actually that shows us or tells us that just protecting breeding colony is not enough, because these birds are highly mobile and they actually spend most of the time at sea. So if we don't protect their at sea habitat, then that's really like a half effort. So that's why I ended my talk with high sea protection, because that's most of the time, these birds spend and obtain all the food sources from sea. So, and then also, like I explained, they have a really slow, maturity and also bonding. It's amazing, they are so loyal to their partner. So if they lost their partner, it takes another, like years and years to actually make another partner and then have a chicks. But then also this growing chicks, like multiple, like factors influencing their breeding success. Mostly I see, I should say, although the invasive species are like one of the biggest issue at the moment in the colony, but shy albatross, like Australian shy albatross colony itself is, thank God, fairly well managed. So in general, like all these albatrosses with a slow maturation will take long time to recover. It's not like a fish actually species. They can actually bounce back very quickly, but not our birds.
Mm.
So they're a species that we would consider high risk then of avian influenza.
That's right, yeah.
So how can we help albatross by avoiding particular seafood? So are there things that we should, when we're going to the fish market, avoid because of the risk that it's posing to the birds?
That's really good question because I introduced the Albatross Task Force team of BirdLife International and their marine program. We slightly changed actually our like objectives. So basically, this pressure should come from the consumers, we believe. So we are actually working closely with the Marine Stewardship Council. You probably see those like a blue mark MSC certification in some of the sustainable fish or other seafood. So you can look for that. And then there's also app Good Fish in Australia. I think WWF and then the Australia Marine Conservation Society. They developed this Good Fish app, so you can also download and then any fish you see at the market, whether you want to check whether it's sustainably caught or not, you can use that app.
Okay, great.
I
We
might
might find a link and
type
pop it
that.
in the chat.
Yeah, I will do
That
that.
would be great. Okay. The next question is a tricky one. Are Australian bird populations inevitably doomed to be affected by H5N1?
It's a good question. I would say Australian birds are doomed to have the virus arrive on our shores. However, how it's going to play out, we simply just don't know, because in some areas it's been pelicans the worst hit. In other areas it's been terns. In other areas it's been penguins. And this is partly due to the different habitats and different situations in these different countries, but it's also due to the fact that the influenza A virus changes all the time. And also the immunity of the wild birds that are being affected also is different. And so, yeah, it's definitely going to affect some families more than others, the water ones, the colonial nesters. And we're working on that project with the federal government to try and predict which ones will be the most badly affected. It really is a rallying cry to stop all of the threatening processes that are already affecting these birds, whether they're already threatened or they're common. Yeah, I think, boosting those populations' health is the best thing that we can do. And then we can ensure that they're not like doomed, hopefully.
Excellent. Thanks, Tanya. So Ruby is in the New South Wales Sea Kayak Club, and she said members often paddle in the Bass Strait around the coast of Tasmania and other states, which is incredibly impressive, I have to say. If they need advice regarding landing on islands, for example, where they should be avoiding, so they're not sort of risking coming into contact with or spreading bird flu, who should they be speaking to? Like, is there a government department they should be directed to?
I would say this is that thing about the communications that's so important. And so when there is an outbreak in the area, it will be the responsibility of the state government to adequately let people know in that area through signage, through media, that the area is closed and that people should avoid it. So yeah, that would be your state government, but hopefully with all the state government planning going on at the moment, that there'll be some really good links with local government as well, and also with, even I could say local BirdLife branches as well. So hopefully we'll all be really well informed the minute it happens.
Right.
I just want to,
sorry,
sorry,
Yuna,
I
go.
just want to add, like, we should be always very cautious, and if you land any of the bird colony, obviously try not to step on any bird poo, and wash all your gears after you come back, and then don't go with the same gear, like where you maybe accidentally stepped on any of the, poo and stuff. So general biosecurity, yeah, it should be applied.
Thanks, Yuna. So Christine says she follows the Northern Royal Albatross at Taiaroa Head in Dunedin in New Zealand. I hope I pronounced that correctly. They're advised New Zealand is at stage 1 of avian influenza epidemic. What does that mean? What's stage 1?
That's a good question. I was just madly Googling there, but I think I believe the stage 1 is it's the preparedness phase, because it hasn't actually
reached
happened
New Zealand,
yet.
has it? No.
Yeah. So Australia and New Zealand are both in stage 1, because there's preparedness, and then there's response of the outbreak, and then there's recovery. And this is what happens with all pandemics. And then there's a point where the pandemic's over, and the outbreak is over. And with the poultry viruses, that outbreak is considered over. Like Victorians might have heard that the H7 outbreak has been declared over, and that's because all of the chickens that had H7 have been killed. So, and then all the testing has not come up with any more H7 virus. It's very difficult with H5, because it's going to be going into wild birds and other animals and then back again. They're pretty much regarding it as non-eradicable, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So just following on from that, a question that's just come in is that the poster's presuming that Australia and New Zealand are actually working closely together, given they're both geographically located very closely together, and they're both at that sort of same stage. Is that right?
Yeah, I would hope so. I have to admit, in our work with the federal government, with DQ, we haven't talked about New Zealand so much because we've been so focused on here. But certainly here at BirdLife Australia, we've been looking with interest at what their response plans look like, and how they're approaching it, and what their comms materials look like. And yeah, I would hope for some good cooperation.
Thank you. Look, we've got about 5 minutes left, which is fantastic. There's a few more questions that are really interesting, so we'll keep going through them. In the areas where the H5N1 flu has hit sort of a large geographical spread, are there signs of population recovery amongst any bird populations? And does that suggest that there's natural immunity at play?
Yeah, I think when I look at aerial images of, let's say, the northern gannet colonies in the UK, and they have these, I didn't want to put them in the presentation, but they like show before, and then during, and then after. And you can see all before, there's all this like gannet nests really close together. And then during, it's just decimated. There's so many less. So and then straight after, there's still quite a reduction in the number of nests, but there is some recovery and there is some immunity. And that's why when you look at AV flu map and look at the outbreaks, you see sort of an outbreak and then it goes, that area goes quiet, and then there's another outbreak here, and then that. It's kind of like, if you remember during the COVID pandemic, we had those waves. And one of the things that the scientists are so worried about H5 bird flu is that it used to be the fact that I can't remember whether it's the winter or the summer months, but there was a bit of a quiet period, but it seems to be more sustained throughout the year. That's another way this sort of supercharged virus is having a bit of an effect. But hoping for natural immunity in wild bird populations is our best bet. And for natural immunity to work properly, we need healthy populations with healthy habitats. So that's like reducing or stopping, I should say, driving on beaches, you know, keeping dogs on leashes, stopping habitat destruction, all of those things. Because how are populations of animals, birds particularly, and sea lions and that, how are they going to develop healthy resistance to the disease if they're stressed from other factors?
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I
Tanya.
want to add, like, again, this is coming back to slow life histories. Like, they just breed, you know, like once a year, and then most albatrosses, you know, just one egg, not even every year. Like gannets, northern gannets, like they can have a, you know, more than one eggs, and skuas as well, but just we see very slow recovery. So it's very sad to see our seabirds are suffering on top of other threats. Now we have this emerging threats, you know, the avian influenza. It's really sad.
Thanks, Yuna. Following on from that, I'm just gonna jump around a little bit. We talked about natural immunity in birds. How far off is a vaccine? Do we know?
So,
and then I guess there's the logistics of actually putting something like that into play.
So vaccines are a little bit problematic. They've been tried overseas and with mixed success. With the condors over there, and there's the practical element also of actually capturing wild birds and vaccinating them, and whether that causes more stress for the birds than just, you know, leaving them alone. And so, yeah, it's definitely being looked at for some of our most threatened species. I think the federal government today described it as for our rarest or most valuable species. And so that's ones that are economically valuable or seen as, regarded as, you know, possibly bringing in tourism or the like. So it's a sort of a bit of a value system, but we can't hang our hat on that completely or even at all, really, because of the expense and the practicalness and the efficacy of vaccines in general.
Let's talk a little bit back about albatross. There's a couple of really interesting questions, and then we'll probably have to call it because we're getting close to 8 o'clock. This one's for you. Do you know how the wandering albatross population on Macquarie Island is going after the removal of introduced species? So I assume this was rodent control. Are they getting an increase in breeding population?
I don't know exactly whether increasing or not, but it is one of the threatened species still. And I think I'm repeating so many times, but it will take a long time to recover, really, because again, with the slow, you know, their lifestyle, like a life, you know, the history. So, but yeah, it's Macquarie Islands and other islands, you know, we've been working towards like removing all the invasive species because rodents like mouse and rats are really causing big problem for albatross species. So not just in Australia, but you probably heard Marion Islands rodent-free campaign is going on with our partner BirdLife South Africa. And then, yeah, so, but I must say Australia and New Zealand are leading this eradication work. And we know within 3 weeks, we will see the benefit of this eradication work. Like weeding is very, very like, long-term, like more than 10 years of commitment we need. But rodent eradication, if it doesn't have any like a resident and on the island, you can actually achieve the goal within very short term. So I wish actually we have the money to do all the eradication work around Australia. We had actually meeting with invasive species eradication team in federal government, and we have 8,000 islands around Australia, and not even one single island like has no, invasive species. So every island basically have some sort of invasive species causing problem for our seabirds. So it's again, yeah, money issue, but at least rodent eradication, like Macquarie Island, if we have a good team with a good, enough money to do the work, we know it's gonna work. So hopefully this wandering albatrosses recover. Not just actually wandering albatrosses. Macquarie Island has so many other species like penguins and giant petrels, and all should thrive soon if there's enough protection in the marine habitat too.
Absolutely. This is a nice one, and I would love to know the answer to this. Are there any albatross with satellite trackers on them where we can follow them live? Or even if not live, is there somewhere we can go for some maps or something?
There's tracking data, platform of BirdLife International where you can see by species which birds have been tracked or not. I can put in the chat. But I don't know whether you can actually see the live sort of location of birds. I did track southern giant petrel from King George Island, and I could see, but we are not allowed to share the link.
Sure.
But yeah, but it was so fun to watch. Like, this bird is here, there. He reached like western tip of Antarctica, and it was really fun to watch. But it's probably now all stopped. Like we cannot see like location anymore. Like after 3 months, I think it's all fell out or didn't work. But yeah, there's a lot of tracking work happening with the albatrosses because actually the satellite tag are very heavy because they need a solar panel to get, the power source, and not many actually small birds are satellite tracked, but at least like albatrosses are barely, like taking this benefit of, the tracking, and we could see like overlaps with the key fisheries, and yeah, so yeah, I love actually tracking.
Excellent. And Tanya, you just popped something in the Q&A chat.
Yeah, I just popped when I was looking preparing for this presentation, I was so excited to find this cam, which is a royal albatross cam of a chick. And yesterday I got to see the parent. Sorry about the noise. I'm just looking at it again. So it's New Zealand Department of Conservation. It's night now, so you can't see much, and the chick's asleep. But the end of the workday yesterday, the sun was setting, and I got to see the parent come and say hi to the chick, and yeah, it's really, really cool. Yeah,
Lovely.
really nice.
Oh, how delightful. I know where I'm going to get distracted tomorrow.
Yeah.
And Yuna's just popped another seabird tracking link in the chat, so we'll pop that over in the Q&A. I think we might have to call it. There's a couple more questions there, but I'm sorry, we're sort of over time now. Tanya's got her email address that was up on the presentation too, so feel free to reach out to her if you have any questions. I think David Marquardt, who's Chair of Southern New South Wales branch, asked if you were both able to share your presentations too, so we can talk about making that available
Definitely.
too. Yeah. Well, thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Yuna, for a fantastic and really interesting presentations from both of you. I learned a lot. It was great.
Right.
Happy Albatross Day.
Yeah, thanks.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. As I said earlier, we'll save the recording. We'll get it popped up on our YouTube channel so you can watch back. You can also check out the back catalogue of talks we've had previously. And we'll have another talk coming probably in the next 2 months for you. So keep an eye out through the Birds in Backyards newsletter or social media with BirdLife. We'll be sending out our emails reminding you of upcoming webinars as well. So hopefully you can join us for another session. Thanks everybody for coming along. I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.